This is FLOSS Weekly. I'm Doc Searls. This week, Katherine, Druckman, and I talk with Golda, Velez, and Romeo, he has a much longer actual name, about AI in a broadest sense, but we go so deep, and there's so many. If you listen to the show or watch the show, you're going to come away with one-liners you never thought of before that are really good and really important and really relevant, and ones you wouldn't want to do without, and that is coming up next.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is FLOSS Weekly, episode 739, recorded Wednesday, July 5th, 2023. Whose AI is it anyway?
Listeners of this program get an ad-free version if they're members of Club TWiT. $7 a month gives you ad-free versions of all of our shows, plus membership in the Club TWiT Discord, a great clubhouse for TWiT listeners. And finally, the TWiT Plus feed with shows like Stacy's Book Club, The Untitled Linux Show, The Giz Fizz, and more. Go to twit.tv/clubtwit. And thanks for your support.
Hello again, everybody, everywhere. I am Doc Searls, and this is FLOSS Weekly. This week, I am joined by Katherine Druckman herself, my companion from another podcast in Houston, Texas. How you doing, Katherine?
I'm okay. Still in Houston. Hot.
Those aren't inconsistent. I'm okay. Still in Houston. There's a country song in that.
Yeah. I'm surviving Houston today.
It's going to be 90-something here in Bloomington, Indiana shortly. So, and I have to walk somewhere immediately after this. So that's going to be an interesting thing because the humidity is, 90% or something like that, I suppose. So our guest today is, or our guests in this case, we started with one guest and now we have two, is Golda Velez, who you and I together talked with a few weeks ago on our podcast, Reality 2.0, which is a bit more conversational than this one. This is more of an interview style, but that I think was the most re-listenable podcast that we've done. I mean, and I say that because I just finished re-listening to it. and I actually stopped taking notes after like the first 9 minutes because there were just too many subjects that were uncovered by anything else. And where are you thinking about taking this one today, Katherine?
Oh, I don't know. I like to go back. I love the conversation about how identity relates to trust.
Me too.
I'm really looking forward to getting into that some more and picking up on everything we may have missed in the last time we talked to Golda. So I think we're going to have a good time.
Well, thank you for focusing on that. That's the key point. If that's the one thing, if everyone stops listening now, that was the key.
well, this is it. So we have you, Golda Velez. You're in Tucson, Arizona, and your companion in work, Romeo, whose full name is is the longest one I've seen on the show so far. So I'll try and cover both of you as briefly as I can. Golda is a Jack or Jill of so many trades that I can't cover them all, and just simply one of the smartest and most engaged people I know in the technical world, or maybe in the world anyway. And Romeo she works with people all over the place, and I mean literally all over the planet, putting together teams and getting tech stuff done, and generally affordably as well. And Romeo, I guess, is one of the people she works with. He's a software engineer. He's a student in computer science at the University of Nigeria in Nsukka. Is that right? Is that how it's pronounced?
It's correct.
Yeah.
Right.
And you're working on software engineering. Why don't you just take turns in telling us just a little bit more about each of you, just to round it out before we dive deeply into AI, which is the only topic these days.
All right. No, it is. It is. I was just talking to the AI since 2 a.m. trying to get my work done before this podcast. So I've been talking to him all morning. So I have a longish background. Came from Caltech, decided I had to do software because I only knew math, and decided I wanted to try to make things better. A good friend of mine there had cooperation.org and long story short is I work my day job is at Ceramic Compose DB, which is an open source, Web3 database layer. That's a decentralized database. And that lets me spend the rest of my time helping and advising this co-owned community startup, which Romeo is a full, I don't want to say full-time, but you put a lot of your time into it and do a lot of work with us, trying to really address the core issue of decentralized trust. And there's plenty in between, but we can get into that later. And yeah, Romeo, why don't you talk a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm I started literally at Nanocode Programming, where I first LinkedIn as a front-end engineer here in Nigeria. It's a software development company that deals with handles projects. So I started my career there as a front-end dev. And currently, I'm at corporation.org. I'm working as like Golda said, we won't put it to full-time, but then I put in a lot of effort to make things happen in the company. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Right.
So let's get rolling on. This is something you brought up on the last podcast, and which is identity in AI, and that ties in with provenance. Like, where did this come from? It ties in with DIDs, which are a hot new thing, which everything gets its own cryptographic private and public key, but the biggest thing is that we need to be able to trust these systems, trust who we're interacting with, trust that the party we're dealing with is the real thing, trust that what they're providing to us, the sources of that are real, all of that stuff. So, and you've spoken more eloquently than anybody on this, so I'm going to set that bar high. You've already said it. Golda, tell us what this is about.
How about a fall? But anyway, that is actually the key thing. And the interesting thing is you hear people talking about a lot of different ways. Everyone's worried about these AIs, right? I mean, who knows what they're going to do? They're going to imitate people. They may be firing guns pretty soon. Who knows what these AIs are going to do? So everyone is worried about them, and people are coming up with different rules about them. I mean, you have this group in Santa Clara that's like, well, they should value humanity first, and they should do this. And I mean, that's great. They should do those things. But there's, I guess, my favorite Russian saying, which I don't know if it's really a Russian saying, is who guards the guards? How do you enforce these rules? And also, how do you enforce how do you watch out for the enforcers of rules? And I think the core issue right there is just what you said, is identity. Because if you don't know who is talking, you can't hold them accountable. If you don't know who is behind them or who's funding them, or, who is being responsible for something, you can't hold them accountable. Now, you can't actually force all the AIs to identify themselves. You can't force people to do anything, right? We got free speech. People can run an AI and just make it say whatever, make it pretend to be whoever. They can do that. You can't stop them from doing that. You can try to pass some laws, but it's going to be hard. I think what you can do is you can recognize long-term identifiers. And it's interesting that you said DIDs are, a new thing. They're not really a new thing, but people are just starting to use them. They've been around a while. They're a W3 standard, and there's like 50 different DID methods. And people have been working on this, as you know, from going to Internet Identity Workshop for quite some time. But the thing about DIDs is they're basically, you can just be a private public key pair. It can be, there's other forms of DIDs. Like I said, there's 50 methods, but you can control your own DID the same way if you're a crypto person, which a lot of you guys are not, you can control your own wallet. So the key here is you can identify yourself. And I think the best we can actually do in reality is, as a community, try to encourage it as a standard, to try to make spaces where only people who identify themselves can come in. They don't have to say their name, but they have to give some long-term pseudonymous identifier that can grow a reputation, where you can say, Joe 77734, I don't know who he is, but he's always said smart things. And then if he does something dumb, he's burning his social credit. Oh man, like Fred 8876, like he tried to sell me a scam thing. Don't listen to Fred 8876. Maybe we'll ban Fred. But you have to have some type of long-term identifier. And I could get all the way into game theory and evolution of trust and all that stuff. But you said this is an interview, so I'll wait for the next question.
Just really quickly, could you, for those less familiar, describe what a DID is?
Sure, I think. I mean, I should know. I use them. I have a DID. It's a decentralized identifier. Oh God, what does it actually stand for? What does DID stand for? Decentralized.
Decentralized identifiers, I think.
Yeah.
Distributed.
The second D is just from the identifier word. It's not a third word. But essentially, it's a way that it could just be a string. I mean, a DID has a URI. It can start with like DID key or DID PKH. There's these different DID methods that you can identify your DID. And so it's basically saying like, here's a prefix telling you how to read my DID, and here's a long string, which is probably not human readable for most of the methods. And this is a permanent identifier. Yeah, there you go. It's a W3C recommendation. And then depending on the method, there may be different ways to look it up. I mean, the simplest method is DID key, where it's literally your DID is a public key. You can prove you own it cryptographically with your private key. So the other methods have different ways of handling that and different types of key management and different signing methods and different encryption strengths. But fundamentally, it's something where you have something private that you don't share, that you can prove to people that this is you. And then you share the public string, just like you do with any key pair. But there's methods for signing it and for lookups and for, looking up who you are. And so the different DID methods provide different types of functionality, but there's a lot of libraries out there that let you sign documents with them. You can, that's how we use it in ComposeDB. You can sign your data stream with a DID. You can control your data stream with a DID. So it gives you this shared framework that different people can build on to allow you to control bits of data with your private key or with your custodial key or with however you're managing it. There's different DID methods with key rotation methods and so on in case you lose your key. But in any case, you have this way to control your identity yourself. And then with it, you can sign things and say, yeah, that was me. I did it. You can't prove it was me physically, but you can prove it was this DID. And then that DID can keep that reputation. And then if there's account takeover, somebody's going to, phish somebody and get their keys. And then that DID will lose its reputation, but you can talk about the reputation of the DID.
Wow.
Sorry,
that's a lot.
Stunned by the technical
I know.
capability.
That's actually the most I've heard about DIDs, possibly. Romeo, you working with DIDs at all? Is that part of your world?
Yeah. I'm still new to DID, but then I can say little things about DID in the sense that it helps to control ownership. Like it empowers individuals with control and ownership over digital identities. And also DID helps in trust and privacy. Like it provides foundation for trust and privacy in the Web3 world. By decentralizing identity management, individuals can choose which entities they trust and share their personal data with using DID.
And actually, the project you work on, Romeo, the JLink True.net project, allows you to sign legal documents with your DID, I believe. That's Jim's project that you're working on.
Yeah, the JLink project. But at that point, I haven't gotten to use DID yet.
Okay.
Did I hear that's the JLink project? Is that the same one that Ian Henderson works on and a number of other people?
Jim Fournier works on it, I think.
Yeah, Jim Fournier. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Romeo's doing the front end on that.
Oh, wonderful. Wow. Yeah, our friends from Scotland and the northwest of the U.S. are working with you on this thing. JLink, by the way, you can look it up as JLINC, and has a protocol. And so so let's go to open source with this, because when we talked before, something came up that actually had to do with identity, and it had to do with the trustworthiness of things that didn't necessarily comport with the stories we tell ourselves about open source to begin with. And so this is relevant to the show, which is like, okay, we know who OpenAI is, and we know what ChatGPT is. So we're talking to that, even though it's like ingested all the bull crap in the world, we know it's coming to us from one spigot, and who runs that spigot. But after Llama was released by Facebook, and now there's this whole herd of ungulates or whatever they are, whatever breed that is, of camels and llamas, they're alpacas and so forth. They're all open source, and they can be used in all kinds of ways. And so, what's your thinking about how we get trust inside of that where there are n number of different systems all based on open source that could have any number of good or nefarious purposes in mind.
That it's very important that somebody build early on a lightweight framework for incorporating identity. And I think the way that should be is you should give a framework that an AI can use. And if it uses it, it can basically answer the question, who are you? And it answers with its did. And we make that a very lightweight open source framework. Let all of the AI developers encourage them to use it. And the standard should be that when you ask an AI, who are you? Who controls you? It should answer with at least an identifier. And if it refuses to answer, now you know, don't trust that AI. Now, the only way we know who is running these AIs is back to the very old system of bind, DNS. You know, we know what domain you're talking to. That's really all you know at this point. And so it's so interesting, you know, with all this, you know, cryptographic trustless stuff, what we really know is what domain you're talking to. And that's still the way it is. But if the AIs, which may be on different platforms, they may be talking to you on Facebook or Twitter or all these things, which now they have to deal with moderating these guys, they should answer a challenge. You know, and I'm just going to rant just a minute. Is that okay?
I please. I'm going.
Please, run on. This is all. This is too good. Too good not to hear.
Like, you know, my parents are
preach,
you know,
sister.
both biologists. You know, a lot of game theory. I grew up hearing about genetic game theory and you know, the selfish gene, and thinking about the selfish meme of selfish brains, or thoughts that jump from brain to brain, which I'm feeding you right now. And so I'm thinking about all these things, and I was at Caltech around lots of scientists, but really the definition of science. I went to the Desert Museum with my 3-year-old. And there was a docent there who was a former scientist, and he was explaining in a very simple way to the parents what is science and what is not science. And what he said to everyone was, science is something you can disprove. If you can't disprove it, it's religion or it's not science anyway. So you have to have something that's disprovable. Therefore, it's not so much what you see, it's how it relates to a challenge. And I think that's the case for a lot of things. I think that's the case for, like, how do you know if somebody's good? It's when you ask them, did you hurt me? And they don't shut you up, but they actually say, oh, who are you? And like, what did I do to hurt you? It's a challenge. You have to have a test case. And I think the test case for AI should be, who are you? Who owns you? And it should answer.
So I have so many thoughts. But so there's this. So going back to, you know, to the idea of how providing said identity builds trust in any system, any human, any whatever. But at the same time, again, when you're talking about requiring requiring a response to that challenge from an AI, how do you punish an AI? Like, how do you yeah, okay. I mean, I get that. But
system. I mean, how
can you?
Sure. I mean, the same way you'd exclude any user. You ban it, you mute it, you give it a shadow ban. You just treat it. The AI is just a user on a system. Right now, they're only text. I mean, later they're going to be walking around, you know, with guns and cars. But right now, they're just text. So all we have to do is kick them off the system like a user. So if they won't answer who they are, you kick them off. But
it seems to me that a well-trained AI has capabilities, obviously, that a human doesn't. And this is, I guess this is where my mind is going into it gets creative, but it seems to me that an AI could get around those types of moderation controls a lot better than a nefarious actor that is human. And I guess that was where my original question.
Well, I mean, it's going to be very clever. But the thing is, if it answers, who are you? It has to answer, like, we make it a simple requirement. You have to answer with a string, a URI. It has to give me a URI. You can give me your LinkedIn URI. You can give me whatever. You got to claim who you are. And if it's a did, it can also prove who it is cryptographically. It can be like sign something with your public key. So that's why dids are better, because it could claim it's some guy off LinkedIn. And who do you know it really is? But if it claims it's a did, you can also say prove it. Sign something, and it has to sign something. And I mean, that might get broken later, but right now cryptography is not broken yet. So if it claims to be a public key, it can sign something with that key and prove that's who it is. So it should also, you know, it should also respond to a request to prove it. I mean, not too often. You don't want to DDoS the things, but it should respond reasonably well to a request to prove who it is. And if it's signing with a did, it can prove who it is. Now, if it says who it is and you've never seen that did before, maybe you want to kick it off. If it says who it is and you know that's a bad reputation did, maybe you want to kick it off. If it says who it is and that did has a good reputation, let's leave it on, whether it's a human or an AI. And if it does something bad, it's burning its reputation. I mean, to me, that's the only thing you can really do.
Okay. I wonder also, sorry.
No, go for it.
Well, there was something that Romeo brought up, and that's empowerment, right? The user empowerment, when you take control of managing your identity or your keys or whatever it is. I wonder, like, where you like there's kind of the gap between a technical user. There's a gap between Romeo and a lot of other people out there, right? And how do you see bridging that gap so that you actually do empower non-technical users? This is always a question that I have with any like brilliant idea that I hear, it's a technical idea. That's my biggest question. How do you get to everybody else?
All right. Is that question for me?
It's a question for both of you.
Yeah, why not? Let's do it.
All right, it's good. I want to give it a try. That's like, you guys get me?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, I think I will have to take a little time and examine this particular question. It's kind of tricky.
Yeah, no, it is hard. I mean, that's one of the hardest things, because anytime there's always a trade-off between convenience and security. If you make something super easy where you're always logged in every time you're on your device, some guy steals your device and there he goes. I mean, I was at RightsCon and a guy from Ghana who's in the LGBTQ community basically said that, it's just a little bit hard to hear, but what they did is they took him, stuck him in a room, made him unlock his phone, and then they phished all his friends while he was locked in a room. And so, that was really bad. He's okay because he was there at RightsCon. He's fine, but he was beat up. And so, I don't know what happened to his friends. I don't know, actually. So, if you give all your trust to a device and you don't have physical security, we used to have a saying in system admin is like, if you don't have physical security, you don't have security. And we forget that about 38% of the world doesn't necessarily have physical security from their governments, depending on what they're doing.
Yeah. So, and how do you see empowering people fixing that problem?
Right. Sorry. Oh, you wanted a solution, not just more problems.
Sorry. No. I mean, ideally, it doesn't have to be, in an ideal world, it doesn't have to be
problem worse. I wasn't thinking it better.
We're still reverberating on they're going to have guns and cars. So I kind of upstaged a lot of other thoughts that were going.
Well, that Mad Magazine, the Spy versus Spy panel with.
Oh yeah, that was great.
Yeah, that's all we're in.
Sergio Aragonis did that. Yeah.
Rest of the life. But no, how does it empower people? I think is a good question. I think actually what I am excited about in AIs is it does empower people to express their intentions, because now you don't have to adapt to the computer, fiddling with these settings and stuff. So somebody has to walk you through it. You just tell it what you want to do. And it understands you. So to me, that's a big difference with AI, that it understands you. So if you had a trusted one, that had different types of security settings, you could interact with it by voice, and it could listen to your voice timbers. You could tell it a few secrets and hide them different places. I think it creates a much more natural user experience that's going to just empower a tremendous amount of things. And maybe we can help. It can help with security if we develop one that is, safe to use locally. But again, there's going to have to be some trust things where, how do you know it's trustworthy? Maybe your friend tells you, maybe your technical friend says, yeah, I can see cryptographically it's signed by somebody I trust. So yeah, you should use it. So I think that the people are going to have to be in a trust network. Romeo might tell his friends which one is good to use. And then all they have to know is which one should I get? And then they can just talk to it.
So yeah, I guess in an ideal world, everyone has that technical friend to help. I guess not specifically related to AI, but just related to taking control of one's digital identity in general. That whole conversation, I guess that's the kind of stuff that interests me in general, just in how that could empower less technical users. But I don't know. That's always my biggest question is yeah, we can come up with some really great technical solutions, but what's the end user experience there, and how approachable is it for everyone to take control over their identity? And for the exact reason that you mentioned before, is because it's great if I can figure out how to prevent my phone contacts from being leaked by a hostile actor. But if not everybody can, then then I don't know how well the problem is solved.
Right. No, I mean, my take on that, and it's just something I think about a lot. I mean, I used to work risk for Postmates. I used to fight organized fraudsters who were, had this whole setup. They were basically another company doing fraud against us. It was like, it really was a spy versus spy thing. But I think a good solution has to be very user friendly. I do think that what we're trying to work on at Link Trust and at cooperation.org is essentially making it easy to see your social graph, just like LinkedIn, but decentralized with separate signatures. So you could see who says something is true, because what people really do is they trust some people they know. And, as long as you're a few hops away from someone who knows something, maybe somebody trusts, trust one of our non-technical people who then trusts Romeo, or somebody trusts you, Katherine. I mean, you're actually pretty technical, but if they trust you and you say to trust me and I say it's this one. So I think it's still a chain of trust. So as long as you're a few hops away from someone who can recommend something, I think you're okay. And as long as we can have that decentralized linked trust, then I think we can get there. Another solution I do want to point out is the app proto, which is the Blue Sky protocol, which does make it easy to bring your identity with you from server to server. And I think that's the one big thing that they focused on first. And I think that was the right call, because it's very transparent. I mean, I've logged into different servers and it's just me. I log in with my app proto ID, and I'm really logging into a different server. In this case, they're both controlled by Blue Sky, but they don't have to be. And it's just me, and it gets my decentralized feed.
So I'd like to jump back to this light. You said among the things we need is this lightweight framework for OS identity, and I want to go into what people are working on. Is anybody working on that as one of the things that we need, or is that part of just going to fall out of identity conversations, and sooner or later we get it?
We better do it soon.
Yeah.
We've submitted a couple grants to work on this stuff. One of the things about open source is, open source is great. And sometimes there's devs who have extra time outside their day job or don't need to make money, and they work on open source and they're great. Sometimes there's companies that are essentially making money from software as a service. I think we're going to need to find more ways to fund open source development, and maybe those will be tokenized ways. That's kind of what Ceramic is doing. I mean, we're going to have to find more ways to fund open source development aside from capturing things in a platform, which is what we've had to do, because we've got to incentivize this. So I hope if somebody's listening, I hope somebody is working on it. I see a lot of groups talking about security, talking about policy. I'm not aware of a particular group working on a lightweight library and a standard for AIs to say who they are. I'd be happy to encourage somebody to start one, or apply for a grant with somebody, or anything I can do to help that happen. I'm not aware of it happening yet.
You just dropped a line that is reverberating in my mind. This may even upstage they'll have cars and guns, which is, we have to find more ways to fund open source than capturing it in a platform. That's what happened, isn't it? I mean, of course, if Greg Crow Hartman was here, he'd disagree with that right now, because he was on a few weeks ago. He works for Linux Foundation. He's not captured in that sense, but 25 years ago, everybody was working outside the corporate world, and then the corporate world, starting really with IBM, said, "Wait a minute! Oh my gosh, all of our Windows servers turned into Samba servers, and all our engineers are running everything, and we might as well get in alignment with them." And then it turned into, we're all about open source in a serious way. And so we're hiring open source. I mean, you see billboards saying hire open source developers, right? And maybe that's not capture. It's certainly, but it's not. I mean, if you're going to do it for a living, you're probably going to do it for a big company. You're going to do it for a company that is mining common interests, but serving their own interests to a greater extent. And even though good open source comes out of it, you're still on the inside. Okay. So, and there's good inside. And Catherine's doing good inside at Intel, right? That's her whole job is to.
Sure, trying. We're all trying very hard, I assure you.
Yeah, it's really not just about Intel. It's about the world. But so here's where I want to go with this, because it seems to me the big missing piece with AI today, in the same way as the big missing piece in computing in 1975, is the personal stuff. And personal AI is as oxymoronic as personal computing was in 1974. And yet all of us need one. All of us need our own. We are absolutely, our lives are woefully complicated by being digital. We're digital beings now. How many subscriptions do we have? How many contracts have we signed? How many agreements have we made? How many times have we consented? What do we own? Where is it? What is there? How do we work our healthcare? All that stuff has gotten more and more and more and more complex. And it would really help to have AI on our side. You know, I would love to. I've got books on the wall behind me. For those of you who can see where I in my basement place here. And I just want to take a camera, point it at that, and have an AI tell me, here's what all those books are. Oh, I remember when you bought these ones from Amazon and those ones in the local bookstores. I saw the receipts and you ran them through the little scanner that, by the way, is a great business to be in right now. Make the scanner that does nothing but scan your receipts and plugs into an AI that can read, and I'm sorry, repeat, can read the stuff. and no, I'm from New Jersey. I'm sorry. And, you know, and make sense of it. I have these drawers over to my left here that are all full of wires. I would like to point a thing in there and say, that's a USB A to C. There's a USB B to C. There's a USB micro to A. You know, there's a bunch of fire wires you're never going to use again. But I mean, you know, make sense of our lives. And last week we talked to these guys from Crossplane, and it occurred to me that I need a crossplane. I need a control plane for all these different things in my life. And what I think happens in a developed world, the developed world that we want, is that mine that I trust, it's only mine, it's only working for me, it's my robot, right, is interacting with AIs out there that it knows are trustworthy. Right. And it has done the searches for provenance, and it has said, no, that's not working. This one will. And we also have ways to look into them and say, wait, mine is cheating on me now, or mine isn't. And there'll be TV shows about that 10 years from now. But nobody's working on that yet, in the same way as almost nobody was working on PCs in 1974. But probably some people are, and you may know, Golda.
Well, I mean, there's the Alpaca LoRa model that can run on a Raspberry Pi, and, you know, but then you have, you know, you can also run it on AWS, the SageMaker, you know, service. So the question is, can the private, really personal ones that will actually work for you and preserve your privacy somehow be funded, or, you know, be incentivized, or somehow somebody develop them to the point where they're just as easy to use as the commercial ones where people are trying to steal all your data? Because of course we know there's commercial interests that would love for you to import all your receipts and all your books and everything so they can sell your data, or, you know, try to, you know, or whatever. And how do we resist that pull? Because those people will be able to make the really, really slick ones because they're going to get tons of money into it. And so the question is, how do we make a good enough one that is private that can talk to the slick one somehow? Like, how do we make that encapsulated space that's private? I mean, I know that's like Tim Berners-Lee's Solid project is all about having your own encapsulated little pods. And that may be the other standard, is maybe keeping that stuff encrypted, only letting the keys, you know, letting it see when it gives the keys to your own privacy. That's the other standard we need to kind of get people to be adjusted to, is, you know, what is it that you're telling the world about my stuff? You know, where is that boundary around my own stuff? And so, you know, again, we have, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I have a kind of answer to a question you had a few sentences ago, which is, how do we basically, how do we, I'll interpret it and hope I'm right. How do we come up with a logic that strips the gears of the logic right now on the sell side that says, it is good for you that we know everything about you, because we can guess better at what you're going to want next, so we can sell you whatever we're selling, and it's all good for you. And it was exemplified by Amazon. Amazon's kind of doing that right now, and on the B2C side of their two-sided model, where they're also selling to the sellers that they're sponsors that are sponsoring you, selling at you. And I think it's that you're going to get better information, companies, if we're telling you on our own as independent entities. You're not guessing at us at all, or you're guessing at us very, very little. We'll invite your guessing when we're ready in the market for whatever. This is Don Marty talking, by the way, and he's been on the show and on both our shows here. But that you'll get better. The signaling from demand to supply will prove to be better than the signaling from supply to demand. The knowledge-based signaling from individual demand toward corporate supply will be better than the guesswork-based signaling from over-informed and multiply uninformed and fraudulently shared data on the sell side. And I think we can make a logical case for that. I've been trying to make it for 20 years. I don't know if you were in the room when, to my amazement and surprise, Tim Berners-Lee said the Solid project, which you just mentioned, was at least partly inspired by a book that I wrote, which just drove me down through the floor. Like, did I just hear this? So I like Solid now. I didn't care that much. I cared some about it before, but it's like, oh yeah, it's great.
You didn't know you had a baby. It's this kid.
Oh my God. Somebody came through some DNA here. So what? No, I didn't know that. Sometimes journalism can work. Who knew? But there's a, but I'd like to probe this. There's a theory here. The theory is that a lot of AIs that are ours working for us at high efficiency and high fidelity to our lives and our interests are going to do a better job of interacting with the marketplace and interacting with entities, not just the marketplace, with governments, with political parties, with churches, with whatever. We'll make better communities if we are better informed about ourselves and our lives and in better control of those than if we're in the world we have now, where giants are busy guessing at us so they can sell us stuff. And I don't know. I hope what I just said is true, but I'm wondering if technically this is starting to look feasible while nobody's yet investing in it.
I mean, I think it is feasible. I think the problem is that last mile of the really good, really slick UI, that takes the money to build. And hopefully, I mean, I'm hopeful too, Doc. I mean, I agree with you. I think that would be better. And my hope is that, by having a voice and text interface where it acts like a person, the UI can actually, it may not be as important that it guides you because it actually can understand you. That's my hope. I don't know, Romeo, I'm curious what you think about that as far as.
Yeah, me too.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, I mean, do you think that we can get to a place where we can actually have a personal AI, whether it's running on your local Android or Raspberry Pi, or whether it's actually running in the cloud, but it's encrypted, but only you can access it without selling the data somewhere? Do you think that can be compelling to people, even to non-technical people, I think?
Yeah, it's possible to get such on the LinkFirst projects, which Aditya did. Yeah, it's kind of running on our local machine and it works. Even the non-technical people can make use of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, people are just going to expect to be able to talk to their machines. And the question is, who are they talking to? Are they talking to kind of a secret entity, from the world embedded in their machine, or are they actually talking to someone they can trust? And my hope is that when it starts to feel more like talking to a person, that we have these instincts for con artists, and that we'll kind of be able to sense which AIs really care about us and which ones are con artists. I think that's what it'll come down to.
Do we have that instinct? This is also a question, I guess, that swims around in my head. especially when we talk about, again, things like attestation and identity and trust. Because again, when you were talking about something like software signing, right? That makes total sense, right? It's signed, you know the package you're expecting is what you're getting. In that context, it makes sense to me. But then when you talk about identities being either human or impersonating human, right? Approaching human. Do we really have that instinct?
Well, I think if we have the expectation that it's like somebody who really knows us, like almost interacting with them. I know people don't want us to anthropomorphize these AIs, but I think
can't help it.
I think it makes sense to, because the relationships that you have, that you're interacting with this entity that's acting a certain way. And I think if you think of it in terms of an entity that you expect to know you expect to understand you, I think that's where our instincts will kick in. Because when somebody that you expect to trust does something to try to sell you something, you're like, oh, wait, no, never mind. I don't want to deal with that person anymore. They're not my friend.
But is that really that common an experience? Where I'm going with this is, to me, humans have a tremendous capacity for trusting the wrong people or messages or platforms, whatever, what have you. That's where I'm going with this. So to me, again, without getting political or whatever, but insert name of non-trusted individual here. Lots of people probably do trust that individual or media personality or whatever. And so and then so I start thinking about these kind of webs of trust and the way that we, as in nerds, software people, think about building trust through verifiable credentials. So let's say you do, you can always prove the identity of insert controversial name. That's no problem. I mean, the identity is obvious, but that doesn't mean it's trustworthy. I guess that's where I'm going.
That's the second thing. So I think there's two things. One is, trusting various entities that you don't know well, that are out there in the world that you expect to have a shallow relationship with. And you don't know, you can be taken in by those. And the other is kind of trusting your personal AI, who you've given your personal information to, who is this long-term entity that you are giving all your books and your receipts to, and either you trust it or you don't. I think that sometimes software engineers should really not be trying to necessarily invent new things. We just need to be trying to actually instantiate the things that people already do. For example, the Byzantine generals problem, where you have these different, storage entities, and one of them is a bad actor. You solve that with gossip. They talk about each other. The little different storage entities say, hey, storage B, he lied to me. Oh, okay, we shouldn't trust him if as long as more than 50% of us are still truthful. You actually solve that by them gossiping about each other. So I think that all the ways that humans deal with each other at small scale, sort of the tribal scale that we're evolved for, is kind of what we want to instantiate in common. But again, I mean, this is about open source. So I think the key is to, make these things as simple as possible and as simple pieces as possible that are not part of some big stack. They're like, oh, you have to install this whole big stack. Make simple protocols, simple languages for talking about these things, and very easy small libraries that everybody can use as this stuff evolves so fast.
Oh my gosh, I'm taking notes here on simple programs, simple languages. I did this.
We need an AI for this. We need an AI.
I know that I need an AI to listen to the show, not just transcribe it live, but to just, where are the pull quotes coming from the show? because they're so good. But first, I have to let everybody know, before we move on, that we have this thing called Club TWiT. And joining Club TWiT's a great way to support the TWiT network. As a member, you get access to ad-free versions of all the shows on TWiT, as well as benefits like TWiT Plus. That's a feed that includes footage and discussions that didn't make the final show edit, and bonus shows we started, such as Hands on Mac, Hands on Windows, Ask Me Anythings, Fireside Chats with TWiT guests and co-hosts. As FLOSS Weekly listeners, you may also be interested in checking out another Club TWiT exclusive show, the Untitled Linux Show. It's one done by Jonathan Bennett, who's another one of the great co-hosts here. So sign up for Club TWiT. It's just $7 a month. Head over to twit.tv/Club TWiT and join today. And we do thank you for your support. So we were talking about keeping things simple. So I'm wondering, again, going back to what's being worked on and what's not, to what extent our own word of mouth is working on this thing. I mean, Golda, you're probably more engaged with more people in more places in the world than anybody I know. Do you have a sense of movement in that direction? Like sparks will land on some dry tinder here and there, and things will come out of the woodwork that get developed?
Well, I mean, I think you're saying I'm very shallow, Doc, but no. Which I am. I mean, like, I'm so excited about it, but I'm not coding it.
I know you're physically small. I didn't think you were shallow. I'm not going to buy that one.
But I think that it's a very exciting time. I mean, it's a bit of a scary time, but it's also a very, very exciting time. I think there's so many people who realize it's a tipping point, that, the AI is just exponentially changing. Right now I was just reading that now they have attached the thing that ran AlphaGo, which is the reinforcement learning, and Google's now attaching that to the generative AI and has this new thing called Gemini that's going to come out soon, and that may blow away ChatGPT. So, I mean, we're just in this stage of like things building on themselves very fast, but also we're at a stage where many people have realized that, wow, maybe it was bad to be captured in Facebook and Twitter. And some of us may have thought that before, but I think there's a large part of, especially the development, the developer engineer community. It's like, wow, decentralization might be important. So we're kind of at this very critical moment, and things are moving very fast. And it's hard to know, because I just joined like the Hugging Face, because Hugging Face is kind of the big open source, right? And they have a Discord. And I think the conversations I'm seeing there are still pretty early on, like, hey, let's have a hackathon. Anybody have a business idea? I want to do this on medical. It's, the acceleration is we're still at the kind of the beginning of that acceleration curve. So it's a good time to join it. It's a good time to throw out your ideas and to start some projects. And I do want to put in a word for one thing that we do here, which is the way that we're sharing work-weighted equity. You can do that a couple ways, like Slicing Pie lets you do it, Fairmint lets you do it. There's DAOs can let you do it, but Colony DAO. But sharing work-weighted equity on a project, so there might be some private things, like maybe some of the encrypted data that's aggregated is private, but maybe the code is open. And there's some owned things that you can make a living off of, because people have to make a living. And doing a lot of those projects in, small cooperative, again, sort of tribal-sized groups, is my hope of how that will grow. And that those groups I can call it dinosaurs to mammals, where Twitter and made are like dinosaurs, one little pea brain trying to control the whole body and clumsily, jumping around. And I'm hoping that we can beat that with a bunch of mammal-sized little cooperatives that interact with each other. But to do that, we have to develop these languages. And that's why the Protocols Not Platforms paper was also very influential, that we got App Proto out of that, and other people are still referring to it. So if we develop these languages and standards that let us have small little groups that don't try to be the center of the universe, that are, federated, like ActivityPub is a federated standard, but it doesn't have to be just ActivityPub. There's other types of hopefully emerging standards of how AIs talk to each other, how, that's what I think we need. And I'm hoping that that's happening, and hope that maybe some of the listeners hear ideas about it.
In the back channel, I'm looking at this. They have said it's a great show. It's a good episode, and they say the members only get an eye patch, which is pretty cool. Possible show title: Beat Dinosaurs with Mammal-Sized Groups. So it seems to me, in almost summary way, it's getting down toward the end of the show, and I just invite people to look into these. We may end up, ideally, if things go the right way, which they may not. That's the world. Maybe they go right and wrong. This is almost like protocols, but because they are protocols in the formal diplomatic sense, with Kim Cameron's 7 Laws of Identity on the one hand, and Elinor Ostrom's 8 Rules for Managing a Commons on the other. And just look them up. Kim Cameron's 7 Laws, Elinor Ostrom's 8 Principles, because I think those are both functional. They're ideal in a way. Ostrom's are based on looking at working commons and how groups, whether it's, groups of police, groups of farmers markets, all kinds of things. She won a Nobel Prize for her work on that. Kim, unfortunately, passed too soon to get his, but it was very. I mean, he probably did more to get Microsoft on the right side of history than anybody else who worked there with those 7 laws way back in 2004. But I just want to put that in as a thought without saying much more about it, because we're toward the end of the show. So we probably need to sum up at this point, and because as always, there's way more to talk about than we want. So. What big questions have we not touched on? And maybe I'll put this one to Romeo. What have we not talked about that we should have talked about? We might save for next time. That might be another way of putting it.
All right. I think we didn't go deep dive into open source model, like both ingrained in alpaca model and Hugging Face adapters. Yeah, I think we didn't really go deep inside as I wanted.
Well, we'll save that one for alpaca. So, Golda, what do you think?
I think I'm a little bit with Romeo. I wasn't sure how much we were supposed to get into code here. I think I was kind of high level. It would be interesting to dive into the how. I think we challenged what should the solutions be? And it's okay, suppose we were going to do it. Let's pretend we're designing it right now. What would we do?
Or something like, how do we amplify the benefits of long-term identifiers?
That's a good one. How do we amplify the benefits of long-term identifiers? Because there will be both permanent and disposable identifiers. Barcodes and QR codes are like that. They get reused. This is why, here's a pro travel tip from a traveler. Peel off those extra barcodes they stick on your luggage, because they may be used for something else 3 weeks from now. But that's a temporary thing. But the world will be full of too many DIDs at some point, right? I think, and we're going to need ways of dealing with that. What are the protocols for that?
Well, there's going to be great garbage collection in general. We've started saving everything.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, back in the 80s. I think it was, Esther Dyson said the challenge is not adding value, it's subtracting garbage.
Right.
Much harder to subtract garbage. So I think we're about out of time now. And oh my gosh, the back channel has so much good action going on. A trivial question, but a fun one anyway. What are your favorite text editor and scripting language?
Oh,
both of you.
Vim and Python. I used to be Perl, but yeah, Python.
All right. Mine is VS Codium, and I use TypeScript.
That's great. Well, this has been an awesome show. Thanks so much for coming on, and given the evanescence and plasticity and flammability and everything going on in all these topics, we'll have to have you back soon.
I would love it. This is the best.
We haven't even touched the guns and cars, so that's and that's a big one. So take it easy, guys.
Oh, I love that one. You got a title of that. Did do it?
Show title. Did the did do it? If it
and we know what the did.
You got to have these guys on. You got to get that guy on.
The evanescence of plasticity. That's another one. Oh my gosh. John the Beard says, I identify as an attack recon drone.
All right, we're not
okay, guys. This is great. So we'll see you next time, guys. Yeah. So Katherine.
Yeah, okay.
There's just the two of us for the moment.
I think we just barely touched all of the questions that I have. The great thing about talking about this topic is that all of these things just start flooding into my head, and I have to grab them as they fly by, and there are too many. And so, yeah, that's why we're going to have to talk about it over and over and over again until I catch all of the questions.
That's what happens every time I'm talking to Golda. It's like, oh, wait a minute, what just got said? Oh,
I know.
I didn't
that was
write
really
that.
good.
I didn't write that down. And then we're on another topic.
On, right?
Yeah, it's pretty good. And I noticed on the back channel they say, get Romeo back on his own. That'll be good. Somebody else says, I like how Romeo is a name still being given. That's great. Yeah, it's also a role to play, isn't it? I suppose.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, that's a whole conversation about identity right there. I mean, naming.
I know.
Yeah,
it's interesting how.
Anyway, I'll save that for another time.
Yeah, it's interesting how as blockchain, I mean, and other things go away, but I'll say blockchain came and went. Cryptocurrency and crypto everything kind of came and went. And now there's AI. I don't think AI is going to go, but identity's been there through all of it. It's always there. And in fact, something Golda didn't say this time that she did say when she talked before, is that one of the problems with cryptocurrency is that it doesn't have identity, right? You're dealing with people, you don't know who you're dealing with, and so we'll have to explore that on the next time we talk, because I think I probably got that a bit wrong, but there's a difference in kind between the conversation we had around cryptocurrency and the kind we need to have about AI that may involve both, and both involve identity in different ways.
Well, an interesting, I think, thing to bring up about cryptocurrency is cryptocurrency at least did get mainstream adoption to an extent. You know, lots of non-technical people understand and trade in and all of that thing, cryptocurrency. And that's kind of an interesting parallel when you're talking about this conversation about identity.
Yeah, I mean, a troublesome thing for me about cryptocurrency is that I knew what it was, and I was too lazy to buy, Bitcoin when it was 2 cents or whatever it was,
Yeah, me.
Oh well. There's a lot of that. Okay, well, so give us a plug, and then we'll.
A plug. Sure.
We'll punch out, and we don't have. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no. Let's see. Where else can you find me trying to catch the thoughts that fly by in my brain? The Reality 2.0, and you can find me on open.intel.com/podcast. Both of those things.
Yes, and I'm pretty sure, looking at our schedule, because we just got a note very recently that our guests, we need to shuffle guests. So we'll fix that. We'll fix that. So anyway, come back next week. We will have something good. I guarantee it. It always is. So until then, I'm Doc Searls. This is FLOSS Weekly, and we'll see you then.
Hey, we should talk Linux. It's the operating system that runs the internet, a bunch of game consoles, cell phones, and maybe even the machine on your desk. But you already knew all that. What you may not know is that TWiT now has a show dedicated to it, the Untitled Linux Show. Whether you're a Linux pro, a burgeoning sysadmin, or just curious what the big deal is, you should join us on the Club TWiT Discord every Saturday afternoon for news, analysis, and tips to sharpen your Linux skills. And then make sure you subscribe to the Club TWiT exclusive Untitled Linux Show. Wait, you're not a Club TWiT member yet? Well, go to twit.tv/clubtwit and sign up. Hope to see you there.